Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Here we are again. We put the record handle back on. Somebody said last time I was here, we had to sort of stop, and it felt like we're stopping, what do you call it? We pick the record arm up, in the middle of everything.
That was a whole other generation.
What do you mean? What?
We can't even remember the name.
Oh, I see. That's exactly right. I had my iPod this morning. I wasn't listening to music. It was my prayers on there. I hadn't finished all my practice this morning, you see, so because I travel around a lot, so instead of having all my prayer books and everything on the plane, it looks a bit ostentatious. Or maybe an iPod looks ostentatious too, I don't know. Because I have everything on my iPod.
Your presence is quite ostentatious.
Oh.
And delightful.
So,
Robina, it's great to have you. I'm going to introduce you.
Please do,
I have a
Howard.
whole formal thing here.
Yes.
Just for you. But before we do that, we're going to introduce ourselves to each other.
Oh, okay, good.
With your permission.
Absolutely, come on.
I didn't dare ring the bell to call you in, so we were just waiting
Okay.
for you. We're graced by your presence. So we take this opportunity to introduce ourselves to one another. My name is Howard.
Bill. Conway. David. George. Baruch. Justin. Carl. Darren. Rick. Todd. Michael. Jer. Eric. Larry. Peter. Oscar. Jeff. Max. Kay. Jim. Bob. Jim. Robert. Clint. Carter. Paul. Art. Rich. Jim. Peter. Michael. Michael. Will.
Okay.
Is everyone on? For the first time, anyone here? Yeah, from where?
Live in Bayview.
Okay.
Originally from Bahama.
Oh, welcome. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And
I'm visiting from Denver, visiting my son Daniel.
wonderful. It's a delight to have you. Welcome. Well, my brothers and sisters, it's my privilege this morning to introduce the Venerable Robina Courtin. Of course, she has spoken with us before, and the arm on the, I forgot what those things are called.
That's right.
What is that called?
Yeah, that's right, the
Turntable.
turntable. That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Robina was ordained as a Tibetan Buddhist nun at the Kopan Monastery in 1978. She has worked full-time since then for Lama Tibetan Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche's Foundation for the Preservation of the Mahayana Tradition. First as their editorial director of Wisdom Publications, and then as editor of the magazine Mandala. She is now director of the Liberation Prison Project, which supports the Buddhist practice of thousands of prisoners in the United States and Australia. Robina will speak on the topic of being your own therapist. So this is a two-part talk. Robina will give the second half of the talk on August the 21st. It's a privilege to have you here this morning.
Thank you very much, Howard. Thanks, everybody. Well, I want to sing a little prayer first. It's in Tibetan, and really, it's what the first part of it is expressing our going for refuge, our reliance upon the Buddha. So if any of you feel like you are Buddhists, then you renew that thought. And the second part is just expressing an altruistic reason, if you like, or motivation for doing this action of sitting here together, thinking about what Buddha says about happiness, suffering, who we are, blah, 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 all of this, you know. The reason we're listening is so that we can see if there's something we can take away as a tool to use to develop our own amazing potential. And Buddha says we have amazing potential. So that on the other hand, we can be of benefit to others. So just thinking that that's our reason. Sangye chadam soke chognam la jancho badu dagni kyab suchi dagi chunyen gi personam ki drola penchir sangye dropasho Sangye chadam soke chognam la jancho badu dagni kyab suchi Dagi chunyen gi personam ki drola penchir sangye dropasho Sangye chadam soke chognam la jancho badu dagni kyab suchi Dagi chunyen gi personam ki drola penchir sangye dropasho. Well, yeah. So, being your own therapist, it sounds like a very good marketing ploy, doesn't it? And I think it actually is a very good marketing ploy, but I think it's also the truth. This is the point, you know. I think really when you strip away all the packaging of what we often think of as Buddhism, like sitting here, you know, silently and doing these things and rituals and dressing like this person with a bald head and so on, and statues and all the religious packaging. I think we talked about this last time. If we really strip it all away and get to the heart of it, what are we trying to do? What's the point? You know, what's the point? Why do we want to sit around here looking holy and being silent? Why? You know, what's the point? Well, the point is to develop this extraordinary potential, and that's called the mind. I mean, you know, we are noses and eyes and eyelashes, and we're also the mind, the consciousness, the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions. And that's, as one Lama says, that's where the workshop is. So seeing as that's what, you know, is what we really are, we do have noses and toes, but they don't make decisions, you know. It's the mind that makes decisions. It's the mind that makes the mouth do things and the body do things. And it's the mind that causes suffering and happiness, therefore. I mean, it's sort of, you know, Buddha says this, but actually it's fairly obvious if you look at it, you know. I mean, if my fist goes out, you don't have to be too intelligent to deduce that there's something similar in my mind. I'm not thinking, oh, I love you, you know. In my mind, you know, so somehow this is the point. We've got to look inside here. So we know very much about therapists, but usually the way we think about it in the West is a bit like sort of damage control. We assume that we just got to live our life, and we assume we're supposed to know what's going on inside us until somehow it gets so painful that you can't get out of bed one morning. Oh my God, I'm so depressed. But it's been going on for years inside the mind. But because we're not trained in our culture to listen to what on earth is going on inside here, you know, and then we have all this guilt and confusion that I shouldn't be thinking this, you know. We don't have tools. We simply haven't been given techniques. It's not part of our life. In this respect, it's not part of our religions. I mean, I was brought up a Catholic, and I'm very grateful for my Catholic upbringing. But I remember when I'd become a Buddhist nun in London years ago, I met this, you know, 80-year-old Catholic nun who was one of the same order of nuns who taught me in Australia. And she was very devoted. I mean, there was no question where she stood in her life. She was an absolutely devoted Catholic. But she asked me to guide her, to give her, instruct her in a 10-day retreat, which I did. She did her own retreat. But I gave her reading materials and various meditations, and she was immensely grateful. She said, I don't learn about the psyche, as she put it, meaning her mind. I don't learn about the psyche in my religion, she said. I mean, with respect, you know. I mean, I've given courses where Catholic priests have attended. So one of the things that we can see that the Buddha can offer are these very practical techniques that enable us to know ourselves. I mean, what else is therapy? As I said, we go to therapists now when things are so bad we just can't handle it. But Buddha's saying, excuse me, you don't need to be suffering, you don't need to be grossly suffering to go to be your own therapist. You need to be your own therapist. This is the way to live your life. I mean, we're extremely good when it comes to external things. We're extremely good when it comes to intellectual things. But we're a mess, isn't it, when it comes to emotional things? Well, I mean, we're all like still about 3 years old. We haven't weaned ourselves off our mummy's breasts, you know. We're still all the pain and the hurt and the jealousy and the attachment and the dramas and the self-pity and the poor me. We just somehow assume in the West this is just the way humans are. You know? It's insane, really. So can you only imagine if since little children we had some kind of understanding of the human emotions? first of all, even being able to discriminate between the so-called positive and the so-called negative, the ones that cause us happiness and the ones that cause us suffering. Even just that alone is amazing. But then secondly, the marvellous point that Buddha makes, which experientially has enormous implications, which is really one of at the crux of what he's saying, is that we do have these positive and negative ones. But this, imagine since we were children that we brought up with the assumption that the jealousy, the anger, the fear, the depression, the anxiety, the low self-esteem is there, but hey, it's not at the core of our being. And this is, we could talk about just this point, that this is at the source, I think, of so much of our suffering. What I'm saying is the assumption that it is at the core of our being. The assumption that this is the way I'm born, we're all made this way, what to do? We throw our hands in the air, until it's so painful, like I said. But I mean, this is where Buddha, says we've all got Buddha nature. I mean, all these nice religious-sounding terms. Well, what does he mean by this? It's exactly this point, that negative stuff is real, it's there, we can't pretend it's not. It causes pain, we can't pretend it doesn't. It causes us to harm others, that's for sure. It's the source of all our problems. But it's not at the core of our being. Now, this just is interesting words, but actually, as I said, the implications of this are pretty incredible. If we could really internalise this, it would give us incredible courage, incredible inspiration, incredible perseverance to want to develop the parts of us that the Buddha would say are innate to us. And this is, simply speaking, the positive stuff. So this word Buddha, it's Sanskrit, it means fully awake. And it's a word that's used, if you like, to refer to the person who has done the job, which is what Buddha says the job is, of completely removing from the mind all the junk, all the painful stuff, all the neuroses, all the ego stuff, and has fully developed, beyond which you can't develop further, all the positive stuff. I mean, putting it in a really simple way, that's what a Buddha is, and this is what Buddha is saying is our potential. Now, if this is not what we mean by therapy, then I don't know what is, I mean, the term psychology wasn't coined back then. And of course, we think we invented it in our culture around about Mr. Freud's time, didn't we? I mean, we think it's a bit embarrassing when you hear that. I mean, Buddha's been talking about the mind for 2,500 years, just that it's because it's couched in so-called religious terms, we often can't hear it properly. We kind of make it all holy and mystical. It's kind of insulting it, actually, That's why I'm saying it's so important to strip away to get to the heart of what it is we're trying to do. So what we're trying to do is become familiar with this mind, with this person, in a really honest way, in a kind way, but a ruthless way too. But, that is to say, recognizing the aspect of ego, if you like. The way Buddha talks about ego, it's not as some great big fat puffed up thing that's so important. Ego actually is, as Lama Yeshe puts it, the self-pity me. It's the unhappy stuff, the poor me, So to become very familiar with this stuff, and we'll talk a bit more about the components of it, and be able to distinguish it from the other parts of me, which are the positive ones, which are sitting there latent, sort of polluted by this painful stuff, So this point that Buddha's making is so important to really just to think about, not just to believe it. And remember, Buddha's saying, don't believe a single word I'm telling you. You check what he says as if it were, you're listening to some instructions about how to make a cake. You wouldn't just believe it. You'd try to understand it so you can do it yourself. Well, that's the approach here. So he's saying to think about this one and to contemplate it and to get the experiential implication from it, I think, as I'm saying. That is that the positive stuff is at the core of our being. It is who we really are. It is who we are, I mean, I like to use this analogy of water. What we mean by water. I have to say it. When I go to a cafe and I ask for hot water, which is my favourite drink, often it's not understood, so I have to go, hot water. Now, I don't know whether that's a Californian accent or who knows what, but that's... So anyway, when we say water, we know what we mean, isn't it, is that pure, clear stuff, the H2O. 2 bits of H, 1 bit of O. We know what we mean, that's what we mean. We all know it's polluted, there's no problem with that. But we know, even without being scientists, that the pollution is not innate to the water, is it? You see my point here? It's a very simple point. The pollution is there, and it will kill you if you drink it. But hey, it does not define the water, and it doesn't fundamentally alter the water. You can extract the pollution. And that's exactly how Buddha's talking about the mind when he says Buddha nature. What he means is that the pure stuff, the positive stuff, is the H2O of our mind. And this is very surprising because, most religions, with respect again, would say we're naturally sinners. We all, and you check that, forget about religion, you check how we instinctively feel. I think this is something that's really quite humbling when we look at it. I think we identify ourselves by the junk. And then, of course, because we ourselves identify with the junk, other people are just like us, they're identifying with their junk, then they dump their junk onto us, and so we all keep feeding each other, projecting our own junk onto each other. And that's the painful part, You check how it's much easier to get angry than be patient, isn't it? It's much easier to be jealous than to rejoice in someone else's happiness, especially if they've just left you. It's much easier. I mean, you understand. We can see, so we can be forgiven for thinking that anger and fear and depression and low self-esteem and all this stuff is natural to us, is innate to us. Now, this also is interesting. You check all the psychological models in our world. They're created by people like you and me, who, in Buddhist terms, are identifying mainly with their negative, who assume that your mummy made you or God made you, assume. The one thing I think all religions, maybe except Buddhism, all religions and all all materialists would agree with is that someone made you and you started in your mummy's womb, Okay, this brings a whole other discussion of karma, but forget that. But the point I'm saying is that even the one of being made by someone else and sort of created by someone else and plonked on this earth, with this jealousy, with this anger, with this horrible life and things happening to me, right? So you think, well, it's just the way we all are, what to do. So we do have an assumption. We do have an assumption that, or actually another way to put it, I think we give equal status to the negative and the positive. We say, this is who I am, the very components of self. Who am I? Well, a bit of jealousy, a lot of love, some of this, not much generosity, rather depressed, very kind. We sort of can look, we give them all equal status. Well, that's the point the Buddha's saying. You don't give equal status in water to the pollution. The pollution is very real, can be even dominant, but it doesn't define the water. It can be extracted. This is the point that Buddha's making. It gives the reason to why you even bother wanting to sit here for half an hour trying to subdue your mind, trying to be a better person, because it's possible. Because if it weren't possible, why are we trying? It's bashing your head against a brick wall, If the negative stuff were innate within us. It's a really interesting point, just this point. If it were truly innate, if the pollution were actually what the water is, if it's H2O, let's say, P27, that it's H2O P27, then you can't disturb it. That is what it is. You see my point? But it's not. It's H2O. The P is separate. You can take it out. And that's the point of being a Buddhist, practicing. It's not just sort of going around in a circle. It's meant to be a progressive thing. If you practice piano, you don't keep doing grade 1, crossing your fingers it'll have a result. You know it will have a result, and you'll get to grade 2. You know you'll keep progressing, and you'll get to grade 3, and you'll become accomplished. You'll become Bach one day, Same here. You keep progressing. It's not just kind of like keeping your head above water, which is how we think of life. We're often in a panic mode, Wake up one day and we're not so depressed. Wow, how amazing, my gosh, But in fact, you can learn. This is the point of being a Buddhist. What practice is, you learn to know the mind. And you learn to lessen and diminish the negative. Not just keep a lid on it and hope it doesn't pop up again next day, which is how we think. You actually learn to get rid of it eventually. This is what Buddha's saying. And develop and develop and develop. The stuff that we know is what we want to be and that we know is positive, which is called love and kindness and wisdom and joy and patience and blah, 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 It's a really clear, proper, progressive, path, like learning piano, learning cake making, or learning to be a more wise, more content, more joyful, more happy human being. It's something doable. This is the thing that Buddha's saying. And even as Buddhists, I think we often don't think this. We just think we've got to do our meditation every day to keep, as I said, to keep a lid on everything, hope it doesn't all burst out again. Oh, wow, I'm happy today. What a relief. Like it's sort of potluck, Like you go to the piano after 5 years of practicing. Oh, God, I wonder if I can play the piano today. Oh, look, it happened. You know with confidence, don't you? If you've practiced for 5 years, to that extent you can play piano. Well, the same with this. So what are these components of our mind? What is the so-called negative stuff? What are these components of ego, if you like? What are the voices, if you like, of the self-pity me? Which are the ones that are the source of the pain and the source of how come we harm others? Well, we all know the words, I mean, I'm sure, like I say, we don't go, oh, yeah, I was jealous yesterday, it was great. I mean, we don't say that. We know it's the painful stuff. So then, certainly in our tradition, you study the cycle, Buddha's model of the mind, if you like, in a very, very, very deep way. You know, it's very straightforward how it's presented. And he talks about, he says that as far as the mind is concerned, there are three main components. Mind, by the way, is this word that's used in this context here as a word that is referring to the entire spectrum of our inner experiences. Thoughts, feelings, emotions, unconscious, subconscious, the whole deal. This is your consciousness, your mind. So the components, you can divide into three, if you like. You can say there are positive states of mind, negative and neutral. Let's forget the neutral, you know. The positive and the negative, and this is again where Buddha's, he's very practical. He's saying that actually the positive, why it's called positive, is not meant to be in some moralistic sense, like you're going to, you know, you get sort of patted on the back for being a nice person. Not like that. It's that they are the qualities that Buddha would say, the positive ones, have this natural relationship with happiness. Natural relationship. There's this direct and natural relationship between the positive states of mind and my happiness. We're not discussing anyone else just now. We're looking into ourselves. And there's this very natural relationship, again, not some judgmental, moralistic thing, between the so-called negative states of mind and suffering. This is, again, a truly interesting point. If we could really see this and experience this. And then when you look into the mind more deeply, the way we do in our tradition, you look into the way the negative states of mind work, how they are these voices of ego, how they are linked to ego, how they are even called ego, what it is that defines ego in the sense of its being the unhappy part of myself. So what are these negative states of mind? Well, we all know them. We know the words. You know, do some market research, everyone would agree. Anger, fear, depression, low self-esteem, hate, jealous, and then the actions of body and speech that come from these states of mind. We know those, you know. We know when they're inside ourselves or when we're on the receiving end, they're extremely painful. So there's certain characteristics, the Buddha would say, that these states of mind possess, which the positive ones necessarily don't. And you could say there are two main ones. Well, and these, using Tibetan terms, one of the synonyms for negative state of mind is the term disturbing emotion. Now that indicates fairly obviously, doesn't it? I mean, you know yourself when you're jealous, when you're depressed, it is disturbing. You are disturbed. We're not discussing anyone else here, just ourselves. There's no question. You can't say it isn't. So all of them that are called the negative ones have this characteristic of being extremely disturbing. Then the other characteristic, which is more difficult to understand initially, but when we do, it really is, it's the key, it really points to the very particular way that Buddha understands the mind, you know. And that is this term delusion. Now it's kind of a surprising one. If someone were to accuse you of being delusional, you'd be kind of insulted, right? Well, that's exactly what Buddha's saying. He's saying, I'm sorry, you guys, all of us, we are delusional. But it's just a question of degree. And if we look at these negative states of mind, and let's do this, he's saying this is the one that is the source of the suffering. This is the one that is the source of the suffering. That basically, when we're caught up in huge attachment, when we're caught up in not even huge, whatever, but when it's easier to see when it's very strong. And let's face it, we don't even notice it until it's very strong. That's the trouble, you know. That when you're caught up in anger or extreme arrogance or extreme low self-esteem or whatever, then we are delusional. Meaning, those states of mind are like liars and are causing us to be out of touch with reality, which is what delusional means, isn't it? A person, when you say they're delusional, they're not in touch with reality, right? Well, this is why Buddha's going on about seeing things as they are, all these nice phrases we know so well. Seeing things as they are, you know, knowing the way things exist, wisdom, reality. This is very meaningful. And what Buddha's saying is right now, being caught up in these various states of mind. And that's what he means by samsara. You know, samsara is not some sexy place where you're allowed to have sex, drugs and rock and roll that you've got to give up for boring old nirvana, which is how we think of it in our religious, puritanical terms. Really. Samsara is being caught up in all these delusions, being caught up in the suffering, because they are the source of suffering. So there's this nice analogy that a bird needs two wings, wisdom and compassion. So we're talking the wisdom wing here. And that's the stuff we do on ourselves. That's the being your own therapist. That's working in the workshop, you know. Fiercely learning to know this person and sort through the junk and discriminate the positive from the negative so we can grow the positive and lessen the negative so we can become more happy. Then on the basis of this, hey, we're qualified to do the compassion wing, which is help others do the same thing. So, okay, this delusional one, let's look at let's see how it's accurate. I mean, even just, the delicious chocolate cake in there in front, right? There's various things going on in the mind that we all now, because we're so good at it all, they're all like, it's all seamless and it happens in one split second. But there are many different things happening in that split second in the mind, right? So one of the things is occurring. So there's various positive things and various negative ones, meaning appropriate, correct states of mind, and then inappropriate, delusional states of mind. They all kind of come together. So it's like if you broke down, just like if we did slow motion, that 1 second of seeing the cake, there's a whole series of things happening in the mind. But like I said, because we're so familiar with this process, we don't break it down. So one of the things to understand from Buddha's point of view about the mind, this already is a huge one, is that there's this huge difference between the sensory consciousness and the mental consciousness. Now in the West, of course, we don't discriminate. We just say there is the body. We don't talk about something that isn't physical. Well, Buddha would assert that the consciousness is non-physical. So we have the mental consciousness, which is all the thoughts and the feelings. It's where it's sort of the computer. It's where all the stories are, the delusions and the positive ones and the love and the kindness and all that stuff. Then the sensory consciousness. There's like dumb animals actually, but we give immense power to our sensory consciousness. Therefore, we're seduced by the sensory objects. We're caught up and dragged by our nose. By mistakes in our mind, in the way that our mind interprets things. So as Lama Yeshe says, we make the body the boss. So sensory, we think, okay, forget the chocolate cake, all right? Human bodies would often be for most of us, do you not agree, that the human body is the strongest object for most of us in terms of attachment, right? Or indeed in terms of aversion, too. So when you stop being in love with them 6 months later, to the extent they were gorgeous once, now they're repulsive, aren't they? So, it's like, but the bottom line here is attachment. So Buddha's saying effectively attachment is the main cause of our suffering. Well, first of all, that's difficult for us to hear because we mix it with love, and when we hear attachment, we hear love, we hear happiness, and so it's rather sad. Oh, I've got to give up my happiness, I've got to give up my heart. No, this is where we have to understand the difference between the so-called positive and negative states of mind. So in relation to that person, you can say you have love for this person. So what's love? Love is under the heading positive. It's an altruistic state of mind, and we can define it simply as, may you be happy. Like we say, it's no strings, It's a delight in the happiness of another person. Now we all know we recognise that one. We've all got it. But the trouble is, you see, the way Buddha says, is polluted by this thing called attachment. But we don't even distinguish. They're like milk and water mixed together. We can't see the difference. So but the fact is a positive state of mind, remember, Buddha says, has a natural relationship with happiness. Happiness meaning content, fulfilled, not suffering, not full of anguish and fear and jealousy and panic. Happiness is simply a happy, delightful, unfettered frame of mind, So love is the source of that. Love can never cause me to suffer. So then we would all say, oh, well, when you love somebody, you're bound to suffer. No. We suffer because of attachment, not love. But we mix them together. That's the problem. So to begin to even work on our minds, we've got to distinguish between these two. And we're just talking one example here. So love is a delight in this person's happiness. Your heart reaches out. Your heart is kind of more open. You're not feeling threatened or panic-stricken or fearful. It's free. It's delightful. Even the small amount, right? We recognise that one. But so what's attachment? Attachment is a disturbing state of mind, and it's a delusional state of mind. It's a liar. So attachment is the part that causes the object to look more delicious than it really is. It's the part of our mind that is the energy of it is dissatisfaction. The energy of it is kind of neediness that causes us to then project onto that body far more than it really has got. Therefore, we give it this responsibility to make me happy. We therefore have expectations that it will make me happy. We therefore get unbelievably tragically disappointed when it doesn't make me happy. All of this is the process of attachment. Now, you all know what I'm talking about. We all do as human beings. We recognise this. This doesn't come from love. This comes from attachment. But it's so sneaky, and it completely is mixed with that, like mixed with the water. You can't see the difference, So, and we're so used to this. We're so completely familiar with this, So really, almost you could say, if we could begin to distinguish just these two, We are being such Buddhists you can't imagine. This is right at the core of how Buddha talks, of real essential Buddhist practice. Learning to distinguish, just these two, not to mention the other ones, but just these two. And attachment is fundamental within us. It's like the default mode of our mind. We often think attachment is, oh, wow, look at that delicious chocolate cake. It's only when it's very strong we notice it. But it really is in the mind all the time, Buddha's saying, as like the default mode. And it's energy. Forget about the way it's actively expressed. And this is what we recognize. It's just that sense of neediness, that sense of dissatisfaction, that sense of lacking something, of not having, of missing something. That therefore that it kind of is like an ache, a pain, that therefore causes us this neediness. We then project it, don't we, onto a person, a cake, a this, a that, a place, you name it. Attachment is bottomless in its capacity for inventing things, objects out there to project itself onto. This is what's happening, and it's just all the time. I mean, that aching sense of not being fulfilled, that's the energy of attachment. In the text they call it dissatisfaction. I mean, it sounds so polite, I think that's probably how it would be for a fairly advanced person. For us, it feels like a raw, aching, gaping hole, right? A deep sense of missing something. And that is the irony of ego. This is the main voice of ego. This is why Lama Yeshe calls it the self-pity me. This is the irony of ego, as Buddha talks about it. That is this, because this attachment is the main voice of the deepest delusion of all, which is this one of this, they call it ego grasping. That is, I mean, if attachment's hard enough to understand, to even recognize, then this one is even more subtle. This is the one that's finally eradicated when you realize emptiness. This is the one that's finally eradicated when you've achieved nirvana. I mean, finally you've accomplished that. So we're talking really advanced here. But the one of the ego grasping, the deepest, most instinctive, primordial, Buddha's saying, mistaken sense of self, wrong sense of self, the main voice of which is I want, in the needy sense, in the attachment sense. And that is then the basis of having anger. As one Lama said, anger is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. So we know, so the Buddhist way of seeing the mind, all these different unhappy emotions that we see as separate little piles are all completely part of this whole picture. They're totally integrated, On the basis of having ego grasping, the mistaken sense of self, clinging to this self-existent, independent, inherent, existing in and of itself me-ness, that's the deepest mistake we all make. On the basis of this, the irony is, therefore, you have this sense of a very bereft, lonely, cut off, separate, frozen in space sense of self, which naturally brings, therefore, attachment, which is, therefore, the neediness, the sense of lacking, which then dumps itself onto all these sorts of things out there, completely hallucinating, making it appear more divine than it really is. That's the biggest hallucination. And then hankering after it, believing that when I get him, I'll get happy. And then all the rest that follow, the jealousy, the anger, all come because of this. So they're so integrated, they're so connected, all these unhappy emotions, And so let's look a bit at how attachment lies to us. I mean, it sounds rather cruel, because right now, all the assumptions we have are that happiness is the prelude to that attachment is the prelude to happiness. Attachment is the prelude to pleasure, and it is. So when we hear that we've got to give up attachment, we also think we've got to give up pleasure. Wrong. Buddha's not saying give up pleasure. He's saying give up attachment. So the trouble is right now, the only way we know how to get pleasure, how we know how to get happiness, is on the basis of an attachment object. That's the problem. So in other words, Buddha's also saying, another way to say it is we're all having attachment, we're all like junkies. It's just a question of degree. And we all know the junkie mind is, when I get this, then I'll get happy. And when you don't get it, you're devastated. So the only way we know how to get happiness now, this is what Buddha's saying, is on the basis of getting something. In fact, that's how we define happiness, What we say happiness is, isn't it? Is it when we get what we want. That's what we mean by happiness. That's the attachment mode. That's the junkie mode. That's suffering. Buddha's saying, hey, happiness is what you get when you give up attachment. And therefore anger, jealousy, pride, and all the rest which follow. And that's the hard part. So to look at it in this way, you've got to be really refined, quite subtle in distinguishing between the different components, I think when we hear this in a sort of religious way, we get very vague and very wishy-washy and very kind of puritanical. But if we understand it very precisely, which is certainly in our tradition, they go off in these monasteries and study all the Buddhist philosophy and psychology for 25, 30 years. They're not just filling their heads with knowledge so they can get full marks in their exams. This is the basis for practice. What I'm talking here is the basis of practice. Because if we, this mind of ours is potentially able to be known by us, and I mean at a very deep level, more deep than we would think in our culture, on the basis of using Buddha's model of the mind, so that you can discriminate between the positive and negative, which means you've got to be very precise, very clear, very exact, which is why we need to have a decent meditation practice, where you're training your mind to be very precise, so that you can look really deeply, and begin to discriminate, and see how the negative ones cause suffering, see how they're delusional, see how they're liars, extract them from the positive ones. So you retain the positive, but you get rid of the junk. And the conclusion is you become a really happy guy, This is the point. Then, yes, useful to others, I've only got an hour, haven't I? Oh, look, 20 minutes to go. Gosh. There's an advantage in talking fast, right? Okay. So attachment is a delusion. It means it's a liar. It's energy. It's the energy of dissatisfaction. It's the energy of not being, not having, of aching hole, of something missing, which is poor me. Think about it. It sounds cruel, but you check it out. You check. What's your name again? David. There's David and me, let's say, having a nice chat. Let's just say. Chatting away, and I'm listening to David, and I'm smiling, and he's listening to me, and we're all just being friendly. Now, technically, you could say that I love David. In that moment, he and I are loving each other. Now, we don't think of love that way, because we think of it as some big drama, huggy, feely thing, don't we? You see my point? Because we mostly mean attachment when we say love. But in the simple sense, if I'm simply listening and we're harmonious, that is when love is prevalent in our minds, meaning I'm happy, he's happy, and he's happy, I'm happy. There's no big drama. So you check this experience. There's no vivid sense of I listening to David. There's more a sense of we, and it's a bit, the sense of self is quite unself-conscious, isn't it? But you watch what happens when suddenly he says things I don't like, or I say things he doesn't like. All of a sudden, there's a sense of two separate people now. Me over here, David over there. He is thinking, what does she think she is? And I'm thinking, who does he think he is? And we're getting all upset and hurt. That's suddenly, right? That's suddenly when, that's you can say, that's when now ego is rising. You can say it like that. Now you look, the difference. That's painful. There's a sense of separateness, isn't there? There's no sense of connectedness. There's no sense of we. There's no sense of harmony. And that's the point about ego that Buddha's saying, the self-pity me. Suddenly it's poor Robina, mean David, all hurt and upset. In other words, you look behind anger, jealousy, depression, loneliness, low self-esteem. You check how the thoughts are going. You check all the thoughts. It's poor me, no one loves me. Poor me, I did not do that. Or the big arrogant one even, is poor me also. How dare they talk to me that way, I mean, it sounds cruel, but you hear it, it's really on the money. Self-pity me, the poor me. And it's in other words, ego is this self-conscious preoccupation. Not being cruel about it. So we shouldn't hear this as kind of beating yourself. It's a question of understanding it, And you check when this is how we are much of the day. The things are going on, whether it's depression or the jealousy or the hurt or someone doesn't love me or they don't answer the telephone or the smallest thing can trigger this. Because all of it is coming from this constant neediness, this constant sense of separateness, lacking something, which is the point of ego. So what Buddha's saying is, hey guys, we have potential like you can't imagine to be hugely fulfilled. I mean, the Dalai Lama said one time, speaking in kind of, especially for our Western terms, when we hear all this Asian stuff of no self, we can easily misunderstand, And he said, listen, bodhisattvas have huge egos. And what he really means is, when you really developed yourself to an incredible degree, it's like your neurotic little miniature pinhead self-pity me self has gone down the toilet. It's finished, You are so fulfilled. You're so content and wise and loving and kind. Therefore, your sense of self is connected to the entire universe. You're huge. You can say that. Right now, ego is huge, but it's miniature. Because it's all little lonely me, all separate, and all these horrible people out there, all these gorgeous things you got to hanker after, Do you see, isn't it? I mean, we understand this. So the thing is, we understand this. This is the status. We all identify with this. But we have to see it, but not. So now, not though, which is the way we tend to do it, is then get caught up in either the guilt I mean, our usual modes are guilt. I'm such a bad person. Beat. And we can easily use Buddhism like a big stick to beat ourselves in that way. And that's so wrong, Or we have denial. I am not like that. Or we have blame. It's his fault. You check. They're the modes we have, So one of the practices we do, we call it four opponent powers. It's like so-called purification. And Lama Zopa says we're insane not to do it every night. And it's based on the whole idea of karma, which is that, the way Buddha talks about karma is that it's this word action, Sanskrit. And it implies reaction. That every single thing we say, do or think is an action. That's how they say it. It is an action, a karma. Meaning every thought, every word, and every, action of my body leaves a seed, if you like, in my mind. An action that will bring a reaction. Where? In my mind. Tomorrow, next day, next day, next day, next day. So it's in this actual sense Buddha's saying we are the producers of ourself. You understand what I'm saying here? That everything I do, say and think is producing me from moment to moment. This is the most practical and tasty way to see about karma. Not some kind of, again, punishment and reward, which is how we think about it, which is really not appropriate. It's that we are the producers of ourselves, Buddha says. Okay, you take this in a long-term thing, and all in the Buddhist text it talks about the continuity of consciousness, blah, 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 but forget that. I'm just looking even just now, So the whole business of this four opponent powers we talk about, this practice we do at the end of the day, it's really practical. It's we can call it the 4 R's, regret, reliance, remedy, and resolve. But again, it's a practical psychological technique, and it really does demand we have a decent relationship with ourselves, which is probably the last person we tend to have a decent relationship with, right? Which is why we're running after everybody else, because we can't bear to be on our own. Who wants to have a relationship with me? So the first one is very interesting. It's called regret. Now, we usually hear guilt, right? And we hear this. And what's guilt? As His Holiness said one time, guilt is you look into the past and you say, I did this, and I did this, and I'm a bad person. And we just stay stuck. We beat ourselves up. And like I said, we can use all this stuff, spiritual practice as a big stick, and it's just unbelievably inappropriate. It's the wrong understanding. So what's regret then? Well, the Buddhist, this approach here we're talking, is it's like acknowledging, yes, I did this and did this and said this and did this. So, but the crucial point here is regret. This first step is for our own sake. It's like in the wisdom wing. It's for our own sake. So just let's say you'd eaten your dinner and someone says there's poison in it. Now, so what are the usual responses? Guilt, which would be, and you're getting sick, right? You've eaten poison. Oh, I'm a bad person, Robina. I ate poison. I'm so stupid, I ate poison. And every day getting sicker and sicker. Robina, I'm so stupid, I ate poison. I mean, you're sitting in it. How stupid, You get my point here? What an idiotic response. What's the right response? Oh my God, I ate poison. Quick, what can I do about it? And that's what regret is. As the Dalai Lama said, regret is saying, yes, I ate poison. But let me see what I can do about it. It's proactive. It recognizes you did something dumb that is going to harm you. And who wants to get harmed? Who wants suffering? No way, I'm fed up with suffering. So of course I'm going to say, quick, give me the doctor, Well, that's the attitude to harming others, and bad-mouthing, and attachment, and depression, and anger, and pride. We shouldn't feel the guilt is meaningless. Regret is reasonable because that is what is harming us. Now, this is a problem for our mind because we mostly think that he is harming us, don't we? That's our trouble. So to take responsibility for this stuff is incredibly courageous. And it's really necessary because this is Buddha's deal. When he talks about we're the source of our own happiness and suffering, he means it. He's not joking in some religious way. He's saying the source of our suffering is our delusions. You suffer because you're angry. We usually think, okay, the poison one, a second mode, the second response would be, oh, Robina, there's poison in your food. Oh, who did it? David put it in there. You go out, busy, suing David. Meanwhile, you're getting sicker and sicker and sicker, But you're so worried about the fact that he did it. And someone even suggests you go to the doctor a bit. What do you mean? It's his fault. I mean, how dumb. This is how we are now. We're obsessed with what he did. Because that's what delusions tell us, that it's out there. I blame David for making me happy, and I blame David for making me suffer. We're dumping responsibility on the outside. Whereas the Buddha's deal is, hey, it's true, he is one of the many causes and conditions that is the sort, in this scenario called my suffering, because there are many causes and conditions that have to come together for anything to occur. Buddha's into cause and effect. But he's not the main one. Whereas right now with delusions, we're obsessed with one only. He is the cause of my suffering. I mean, look at the world. We can deduce this is the philosophy of the world, But Buddha's deal is, of course, state is a factor in my suffering. But hey, what can we do? But all Buddha's saying is he's not the main one. Back off, Robina, give the man a break, get out of his way. Sure, he's a maniac, you know, but that's his problem. Now let's look at my part of the deal. And so my part of the deal here is let's look into what arises in my mind when he punches me in the nose. And that's called anger, resentment, whatever it might be. That's what I'm concerned with. That's the poison. That's destroying me. I mean, I remember this guy who visited the friends we have on death row in Kentucky. And they told me this is a Catholic guy, old Catholic guy, like 85 or something, whose daughter was murdered 30 years ago. And all those years, this guy himself, he talked about how he was out of his mind with rage and grief and all the rest. Of course, we understand. But in the West, we assume the rage and the bitterness is normal, natural, and comes with the grief. The Buddha says, no, you can distinguish. You don't have to have those ones. So, the point of this old bloke, he said himself, he slowly came to realise that those 30 years, his daughter was dead, the murderer was executed, but there he was, full of rage still. And he realised it was the rage that was the source of his suffering. So he lightened up, did his own way, went back to church, and now his heart's light, and he's kind of, he's not suffering so much. That's the point the Buddha's making. So we're so convinced David punching me is the source of my suffering. Somebody doing this is the source of my suffering. It does play a role. You can't say it doesn't. But all Buddha's saying is, you can remove David from your life, but as long as you have anger, you're going to meet another David. So when you work on the source, which is the anger, okay, a deeper source of it, and there's another discussion, no time here, there are all the discussions about the karma from the past and this stuff, which is even why you meet David. This is how they talk, That's another whole level of it. But even just here, if I can take responsibility for the poison in me and know that is what is causing my heart to break, so then I can regret this. Why? Regret means it's like kindness to yourself, like the poison. You regret it, and you have to acknowledge it. You can't live in denial, which is the third one. What do you mean I took poison? I did not. How dumb. You've got to acknowledge the painful fact that you ate poison, that you were angry, whatever. Then that is the source of regret. So it's a kindness to yourself, which means you've got to have this decent relationship to even want to think about this and this and this. And I regret this. You think, I regret this from the depths of my heart. Why? Because I don't want more suffering. All this talk of renunciation, that's all it means. Renunciation is the recognition that, hey, you're fed up with suffering. But the crucial point is you've finally looked at and recognised that your states of mind are the source of it. That's really so wholesome. Then you go to the second one where you reliance. This is where you take refuge in the Buddha, blah, blah, like the doctor. It's the relationship a Buddhist would have with the Buddha, not as a creator, as you know, but as a doctor who has the medicine that you can take. But the second part here is compassion for others. You'd think of wanting not to harm others and so on and so on. The third one is you do some kind of practice, the remedy. And there's a whole medicine cabinet of practices, The fourth one, though, is again like the first, demands a decent relationship with yourself, which is where we can, as Lama Zopa says, mould our mind into any shape we like. It's the resolve, the determination to change. And this is where we can make progress. We have the capacity to change the way we are. But we first have to acknowledge it. You first have to own it. Not out of guilt, but out of courage, and out of the fact that it isn't innate to you, and out of the fact that it's the source of your pain. This is the thing.
Robina, we have a few minutes.
We didn't start till 5 past.
Would you entertain questions?
Hey?
Would you entertain questions?
Yeah, of course. People want, ask questions now. Come on. I'm happy. Just as long as, what do you guys want? Tea time and everything. So are there any? Yes?
I have a general question about transitioning from Christianity to Buddhism.
Good, go on.
And the guilt that sort of...
Oh, darling, don't be guilty. Are you feeling guilty? I'm not being...
like I'm leaving that
I understand.
Christ figure behind.
No, I understand. Okay.
Help me.
No, I do. Absolutely, yes. Well, I have to say...
The church is fine. That can go.
Okay. Well, I'm not trying to be wishy-washy here, but you don't need to leave that behind. If our mind is spacious enough, on a conventional level, yes, you're making a simple decision. Okay, I'm going to go to a Buddhist group now instead of my Christian group. It's sort of like leaving Fred for Joe. It's a fact. You can't say you're not. You see my point, and that's just the way it is. But from the more spacious point of view, you really, if you have a strong feeling for Christ, then you just have a sense that it's that it's okay. There's no contradiction. There's not a contradiction. I mean, you see this, anybody who's really spiritual, there's no contradiction. It's when we're fundamentalists that we see all as division, therefore guilt and all that stuff. You know, you understand. So don't even think you're giving it up. Even use that image. Even whatever you talk about, whether you call it prayer, there's no contradiction. But the Buddhist way to think about it is use it as an example of what you can become. Do you see my point? As an example of your potential. Use it, absolutely. There's no contradiction. Yeah. Yes.
I have something that kind of goes in with that your train of thought there. I was raised Catholic. A lot of my family is fundamentalist Christian. And a few years back, I had an email conversation with my brother. At the time, I was attending Catholic church. I asked him, do you believe in God? And I know his wife was atheist. And just this week, I just had this moment of clarity about the definition of God. And his response at the time was, I believe there's a God, I just don't know what it's.
I understand.
What.
Sure.
And that was fine for he had a valid answer for me. But this week, to me, it struck me that God, in my mind, at this time, is a level of consciousness and clarity that mankind has embraced, and somehow it's just put a name on it.
I understand.
Attached to personality, and of course with the personality comes all the flaws of a human being.
Yes.
But for me, God, I mean, as I've defined it, or I understand it this week, in fact, it's just really consciousness and clarity.
I understand.
And just embracing it. And
I understand. Well, that is a way you could say that what Buddha's saying is that we have consciousness, and this is a word that he would use synonymously with the word mind, which is all the part of me. What's your name? Carl. The difference between dead Carl and live Carl is the presence of mind. I mean, in the West we call it the chemical this and all the whatever they say. I forget. I'm not. Understand. But the Buddhist approach would be there is all the components of who you are, your thoughts, your feelings, your tendencies. This is Carl's consciousness. And the Buddha, in the teachings, they say it goes into your mother's womb at the time of conception because it was existing before, because it wasn't created, and it will leave the body after Carl dies. So the Christians would call it the soul. The difference would be, I'm coming to a point here. The difference would be that comes from a creator called God. This is where the difference in Buddhism. Buddha even uses the term superior being, Arya beings. And the term superior being is for a person, a consciousness, has been like Carl, who has progressed, grade 12, university, postgraduate, keeps developing spiritually to the point where they've gone beyond delusions, and their consciousness is truly a superior consciousness insofar as it's no longer deluded. And you keep perfecting that consciousness, Carl's, and it will become a Buddha consciousness. So in that sense, exactly is what Buddha is saying. But the difference Buddha would say is that is not a creator. Because the Buddha would say all consciousnesses that exist are beginningless. They don't need to be created. They're already existing. So in a way, you can, speaking very loosely, you could say, we think of God as omniscient and omnipotent and all-pervading, all-loving, all-compassionate. Well, that's exactly how you talk about Buddha consciousness. Do you see my point, Carl? So in that sense, you could say the same. But the difference would be, one, not a creator, and two, everyone can become it. So you, in that sense, what you just described is agreeing with the Buddhist approach.
Is that to say there's really no beginning or end to consciousness?
Buddha would say that. He's saying if you posit cause and effect, which is his deal, that's his creative principle, cause and effect, that if this is existing, it has to come from something before. And if that was existing, that moment, even of Carl's consciousness, even if we think of, it's a really good meditation to do, you go back in your consciousness, each moment, you trace it right back, 3, 2, 1, baby, in the womb, to the first second before conception. It's each moment now is dependent upon a previous moment. It's like a chain of mental moments, isn't it? Well, the Buddha would say you keep tracing that chain of mental moments. It's not physical. Cannot be created by someone else. I'm just saying the words here. You've got to think about it. It doesn't come from parents. They don't make you. Your mummy and daddy give you a body. How kind, But they don't give you your consciousness is what went into that egg and sperm from the second before, and it was going back and back and back. And even clearly, there is no time, but I would love to talk about it, what to do. But in all the texts that they study in the monasteries in Tibet, right, and all coming from the Indian teachings, coming back from the Buddha's stuff, there's this very detailed descriptions of the way universes come into being too, and about the nature of matter and all this. And as the Dalai Lama said one time, he has all these discussions called Mind and Life over the last 15, 20 years with Western scientists, all the best brains in the West. And one time he said, Big Bang? No problem. Just not the first Big Bang, that's all. So even the way universes come into being, there's not some big first anything. They can't, if you say cause and effect, chicken and egg, you cannot have a first one. Instinctively, we desperately want a first one. It's something kind of interesting. But if you really do posit cause and effect, you can't have a first cause. This is the way Buddha would talk. Do you see what I'm saying?
Robina, we bow in gratitude to your
Okay.
To remind us that Robina will be back with us on August the 21st to continue the record of the symphony of your reflections.
Am I allowed to finish with another prayer?
You will have an opportunity
Well,
to
you've
offer
done.
us a dedication of merit. We're going to do a little song of business.
Oh, beg your pardon. Okay, sorry.
And then if you could
Don't know your procedures.
offer us the dedication of merit,
Okay.
we'd be very grateful to you.
Mm-hmm.
The business of the Sangha.
Well, we're inviting the mission of having a picnic, summer picnic. So it's in the newsletter, all the information in the newsletter you can get on the website. I have flyers too. It's August 20th in Sylvan Park. The site we had before, which is really a wonderful site, Lake Creek site. So anyway, I have flyers. If you're interested, just come to me. But if I run out of flyers or you don't get one now, just check the website. It has all the information. Or your own physical newsletter. August 20th.
Thank you. Okay.
Good morning. My name is Kay, and I'm the host this morning. And so please join us for refreshment and tea. And if you have tea, please wash your cups and put it back. We also have a Dynamo out there, and that's the way that we finance the war activities. So please put the suggested donation of $5 to $8, and if you can give more, please do so. If you cannot, give whatever you can, but please support GBS by giving to Dynamo. And we also have a sign-up sheet for new members, so please put down your street address as well as email address so that we can stay in touch with you. And finally, there will be usually a group of people who go out to have lunch around 12:30. So if you're interested, if you can't find a group, please let me know. Yeah, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Kay. I know, Robina, you have some material out
I've got a commercial, yeah.
You're on it.
Well, in 2001, my friend Peggy said, Robina, why don't you lead a pilgrimage? It will help the prison project. I thought, well, that's an interesting idea. So I asked my friend Effie, who runs Himalayan High Treks here in the city, and she said, yes, she'd love to do it. So we've done it every year. About 25 people come every year. We start in Kathmandu. We stay at very nice places as well as at monasteries. We go to our monastery Kopan. Then we go to all the places of the Buddha, where he got born, where he passed away, where he taught the Heart Sutra, the Four Noble Truths, Vulture Peak, all these places. It's a month. And it's just, I'm amazed every year. I'm just absolutely amazed. People completely have such a wonderful time. It's a great experience. And any profit supports our prison project. So we're doing it again this year. We've got people booked up. There's a few places left. The dates are out there. Late October till, about 30 days altogether, 29 days altogether. So if anyone has the slightest interest in it, take one of those cards or just write your email and your name on, then Effie will email you about it. But it's really a very special experience.
Rabina's materials are right next to the kitchen.
Next to the microwave.
Kitchen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Also, an announcement about the retreat. GBF's own retreat is from September 16 to 18. The sign-up sheets are available out there. We're getting great responses, and at least a couple people from Tucson will be joining us. So that'll be a great event. So if you're interested, please sign up. The reduced registration rate is available until September 1st. Thank you.
My name is Darren. We're going to be starting a kind of like a study group, I guess, of different forms of meditation for this meeting at about 9:45 to 10:15. I guess it'll be the second Sunday.
I'm here.
The second Sunday?
Which is next Sunday.
Right. So we're not going to start next time, but probably I think the following September would be September 11th. So quite a date, but so for people that would like to come, or if you know people who are interested in starting meditation, but they don't really know, they want a little bit of instruction or guidance, start spreading the word.
Wonderful. So they can talk Darren to you or to Bob.
Yeah. It's basically 9:45 to 10:15. So if you're needing instruction.
Wonderful. Any other? Then we stand. Then we stand and take one another's hands.
Okay, so just think. So just think. All right, sitting here 1 hour, whatever, and as many moments as there have been is actually as many seeds each one of us has planted in our mind. So first of all, don't think you're the same person that trotted in the door an hour and a half ago. You're not. You're just in a whole pile of gardening. Thinking like this, you've changed already. Putting all these thoughts there. So the second thing to think is, great. These seeds I planted, these thoughts that have arisen, any aspirations, any kind of acknowledgements of something, may I nourish these seeds from this second forward so that I can develop my amazing potential, so I can be of benefit to others. Kewadi nyu dudai Lama sangye drugyunen drowa chikyang malupa Dei salaga pasho Jang chup sem chug Rinpoche Ma ke panam ke gyuchik Ke panyam pa me payang Kong ne gong du basho. Thank you everyone very much.
Thank you very much. Now, what are the 4 R's? I think you got through 3 of them, right?
Regret,
reliance,
remedy, and resolve.
Oh, and resolve.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.